Hello, guys. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Kuda Kwashe. I'm super excited to be talking to you today because today I'm actually getting I got an experience to look back on my journey and to actually visit every single week since I got laid off and to see the events that were happening within that week. Let me fix this real quick. To actually see the events that were happening in that week and the events that happened in that month. And what inspired this is that I was talking to one of my mentees and I was asking her what she would love to hear from me in some of these videos. And something came up again that I've had other people ask for, which is like just my journey, like really understanding when it all started, what I did after learning about the layoff, what was the layoff resulting of, like the situation that was happening in my life, but also like any key learnings and stuff from there, and any advice that comes from that. So I'm creating a series of my journey, and this is gonna be part one of that journey. And there are three things that I'm going to be trying to do. I'm going to try and tell you my experience throughout my experience throughout that experience, and I'm going to tell you my the key moments that happened in those circumstances, the key events, and the key learnings from that, and then finally give you some advice. So key moments, key learning, and my advice. Like if I was to go through that again, what I would do. So that's going to be the advice piece. Yeah, so part one, I just want to let you know about how we got here in the first place. So I was laid off on October 15th last year. It's actually almost 12 months now. It's exactly a month from a year. So it will be a year in a couple of days, in a month from now. And technically, actually, I was laid off technically November 15th because I stayed on their books for a month. It was a favor they gave me, given that if you're an international person, you only have 60 days from the day that you leave the company's books to find another company that will sponsor you and transfer your visa to that company. And so it really was a time crunch. It's really a time crunch when you're an international person, when you get laid off. So they gave me another month to sort of figure things out, which I'm very, very grateful for. So if they're watching this, thank you. But it still wasn't ideal, right? Because I just lost my job. I really just have about between 60 to 90 days to find another job. So it was game on from the day that I learned about this. Leading up to the layoff, the company was acting weird. My wife now at the time was just my fiance. We had just gotten engaged actually. So the news came a week after we came back from our engagement moon. So I had taken her on a trip to Washington, back to Portland where we met, just doing a tour, redoing our dates essentially. So it was an idea that I had just as a way to celebrate us being engaged 4 years after meeting each other, to go back to where we met and do essentially everything we did when we met. All those dates in Portland. Portland's beautiful, so it was a great opportunity to go back. But I took her to Puerto Rico. All these were surprises. She had no idea where we were going the day that we left Auckland to go down to these places. So I mean, it was an exciting, full of joy time. So to receive this news was incredibly hard trending, and I'm sure some of the situations that you guys are in are probably almost the same, where it's like even if like you are not even already happy in your life, like even you are not happy at the job, just receiving the news that prematurely a company is letting you go is one of the toughest situations of your life. So leading up to that, the company that actually let go the CEO. So that's when we knew that something was going on here that was not good. So the CEO had gotten pushed out about a month before they did the layoffs. So leading up to that, we knew that something was not right. Even my wife had been like, "Hey, like you need to start looking elsewhere." So I started just looking, but when we went on the engagement moon, of course, I couldn't be like, just wanted to have fun. So we had fun. But a week after we came back, that's when I got laid off. And so. I'm going to talk more about, because I was laid off in October, end of October, leading up to into November. I'm really going to focus on November because that's when things really started picking up. Although there are key things that happened end of November, and that's the second week. A week after I got laid off, I had my first phone screen, my first phone call, which like was making me freak out when I checked my stats and the people I talked to in that month, end of October leading up to November and the whole month of November. I had so many interviews that month, and I'm gonna talk about some of them here. And man, I was looking at them and I screamed because I'm like, how in the world was I expecting myself to be ready to interview with these companies? Because I know, right? Looking back, I know what they expected of me at the time. I know what they needed from me, but at the time, like when I was interviewing, I had no idea. Like this was my first time full on looking for a job as a full time job. It was my first time interviewing with some of these, big companies in a very long time, and in a different setting where I'm looking for a different level as well. So man, it was such a learning curve for me, and I had to do that within 60 days. And so November, I went to Afrotech. Like, so I was actually quite excited. At the beginning of this layoff, I was actually excited. I know that sounds crazy. I was excited because I didn't feel like I was growing that much in my previous company, honestly, especially at the tip end of that, just before the layoffs. I felt like I wasn't moving in the direction I wanted to be. I felt I didn't wasn't really valued as much as I thought that I was worth. And so it was kind of like, oh, maybe the God really wants me to jump off and jump ship and go to another place. And he couldn't find any other way to push me but to give me this opportunity. So I looked at it as an opportunity, which I still do, but like my perspective has changed. And so when I went to Afrotech, I was super excited because I was like, in the past, like when I had been to Afrotech, I had been to Afrotech 2 years prior in 2021 when it was in Auckland. And some of the people that I had met at Afrotech actually had gotten hired while at Afrotech. They had done even their final interviews there and gotten an offer, or gotten a verbal offer from Afrotech. So I was like, very positive going into it. And man, little did I know that Afrotech last year was going to be the ghetto. And the reason why is that last year saw a lot of people being laid off. Funny story is actually one of the companies that interviewed me at Afrotech. They'd called me prior to Afrotech and said, hey, we want to chat with you. We really like your resume. We think it'll be a great fit for our company. And that's Live Nation. So Live Nation called me. They set up an interview with me at the time that I was at Afrotech. And when I got to the interview, I got there like maybe 5 or 10 minutes prior, and there were people there also waiting to be interviewed. There were about 2 or 3 other people, and as we started talking, all of them were laid off. Had been laid off in the last couple weeks before Afrotech, and as I started talking to people, as I was talking to people around the block, seeing what they were coming from, what they were looking for, I realized like almost everybody I was meeting was looking for a job, but not because they wanted to jump ship, but because they actually didn't have a job. And man, I was like, this is crazy. So yeah, there was a crazy number of people looking for jobs at Afrotech, and up to today, I don't know anyone who got an offer there, which is quite weird because normally you would hear people's stories of getting a job at Afrotech, but this time it wasn't the case, at least for me. So by the time I was done with the conference, my feet hurt. My voice, I'd lost my voice. I was talking so much to different kind of people, looking for opportunities, trying to find that link that would get me my next job. I had a few interviews lined up at Afrotech. I had an interview with Morgan Stanley. I had an interview with Deloitte. Some of the companies were not taking people like me at the Afrotech. And by like me, I mean people with a visa. So the Capital One, for example, were pretty much saying they were not taking anyone with a visa. A bunch of other companies were not even talking to people who had a visa. So that also limited some of my chances. But there are a couple of companies that showed a lot of interest in me. JP Morgan and Chase. They even invited me to a private event that they had on a rooftop. And I was like, man, I'm finally hired. I was super excited. These execs took my number and they said they would call me the next week or the week after. We'll set up a final interview. Everything will be fine. They already liked me. So I talked to 3 different orgs within JP and Morgan and Chase. At Afrotech, I talked to a bunch of companies. I got a lot of contacts, people showed a lot of interest. I even had interviews there. I had interviews with Stripe. Stripe like invited me to a branch. But the Stripe one was not really a technical interview. It was really more informational with the recruiter. And then the recruiter asked me the roles I was interested in, and I applied while I was there. They said they would follow up. It would take another couple months until Stripe finally followed up. And that's a whole other story I'll tell in a later episode, which actually was quite heartbreaking, because eventually, after going through up to on-site with them a few days before the on-site, they told me like, hey, we're not gonna move forward, because I think I'd done some parts of the on-site because it's different interviews. They told me they're not gonna move forward because I need a visa. So yeah, it was quite sad. But anyways, I had chatted with them and then done some of the interviews at Afrotech. I talked to other bunch of companies while I was there, but none of them had given me an offer. So even like I interviewed with Morgan Stanley, because my friend works there and he had connected me while I was there. He actually is the one that interviewed me while we were at Afrotech, because he was interviewing people. And so the very last day I saw him, he was like, dude, I didn't see you. I should have seen you. I could have interviewed you. I could have given you an interview. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. And so we did an interview. The question was, it was a question that I had, done prior. So I was pretty comfortable with it. And and I never heard back from them. Just so you know, I never heard back from them. So all these things happened at Afrotech. So I come back out from Afrotech, and that first month, I talked to a lot of companies. Guys, I was freaking out when I was looking at my calendar, because every single day in November, it was either I was doing a recruiter call or I was doing a technical phone screen. And that month, actually a week after I got laid off, I reached out to a recruiter from Google that I was already connected with. Reached out to a recruiter from DoorDash that I'd connected with a year prior to that, when I tried interviewing just to check out how the waters were. So I had some connects from Meta, DoorDash, and Google that I reached out to right off the bat. So the week that I came back from Afrotech, I had a technical phone screen with DoorDash, Pinterest on the same day. On 20 November, I had an interview at 9 a.m. I had an interview with Pinterest, and then later on in the day, I had an interview with DoorDash on the same day, or vice versa. And Google, that same month, I had my phone screen as well. And man, when I look back at all these things, another story that I missed one of the things that I learned while I was at Afrotech, outside of the fact that a lot of people were reaching out trying to get interviews, there's one key learning that I will share, that I learned from that, was that when I went to talk to Pinterest, I started talking to the recruiter and I was telling them, hey, I've always been applying to Pinterest, but it seems like I never get a response. What's going on? I think my resume is great. And she looked at my resume, and she's like, dude, I haven't even seen your resume. Do you know how many people have applied to this role? It's one role, and it has more than 4,000 people. And I just recently opened it, and I was like, damn. And so I started asking it, because I'd always imagined, I don't know if this is the same for you guys, I'd always imagined that when they put out these roles, it's only one role that they're putting up, but they have a bunch of other roles, and they're just using it as a way to get people to apply. So I always imagine that there's like a bunch of other roles they're trying to fill, and this is just the one requisition that they have up. No, that's not the case. Most of these companies, when they put that role up, if you're seeing one role, then that means that in the entire company, that's the role they're hiring for. And if you know other people that are interviewing, they're probably interviewing for that particular role. So that was crazy for me to learn. So yeah, so in terms of phone screens, that month of November, I had a call from OpenAI. The OpenAI recruiter, I had applied to a bunch of roles. I was surprised that they reached back to me, and we had a chat. I didn't have the technical phone screen that same month, but that month of November, I talked to OpenAI, I talked to Deloitte, I talked to Morgan Stanley at Afrotech, I talked to Apple, because I was interested, but they didn't have any roles, but I connected with the hiring manager from there. I'll tell you the story that happened from that later on, just recently, because of that person that I met at Afrotech. And then I talked to DoorDash, Google, Pinterest. I had 10 phone screens, which I failed. Both of them, the DoorDash and the Pinterest, I failed them. Because, guys, if I when I look back, it was only a few weeks after I got laid off. And I had been to Afrotech. I had been busy. I was sick. I was tired. I was trying to do a lot. I was dealing with the emotions of being laid off. And literally a month after, I'm taking a phone screen. Like, that didn't make any sense when I look back. So let's move on to talking about. So I've just told you the story of everything that happened, how I got laid off, where I was, what I did, the companies I talked to and interviewed with. I think I may be missing some of the companies because I remember that same month, just when I got back from Afrotech, a recruiter from Airbnb reached out to me. Yeah, he's a great guy. He's been my connect now. Reached out to me. I had a phone call with him, but I didn't take the take-off phone screen that same month. I think I would take it in December. So yeah, that's pretty much was the picture of what happened that month in terms of interviewing and everything around that. And so those are the key moments, the key learnings from that is, first of all, I didn't give myself enough time. So guys, I know you have 60 days if you're on H1B and if you listen to this and you just got laid off and you have 60 days to find a job, just take a pause. If that means take a pause for a week, please take it. I remember when I got laid off, I was like, I didn't listen to anybody else. My friend who had been laid off the year prior and found a job told me, like, I should just take some time off. Just like relax, bro. Like, just like relax and just like think about what just happened to you. Let it sink in. And then next week, you can then start, coming up with your resume. Spend the next week just building your resume, thinking about key experiences in your past and what you're really looking for and stuff like that. And think about, how you're gonna prep and have a plan. I didn't listen to all of that. I was like, because in my head, I was like, I just need to go. I just need to apply. I just need to get a job. 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 That's all I was thinking. But I strongly advise you not to do that. I advise you that if you're just going to lay it off, if it's your first day of your layoff or you're watching this, please take a week off to just think about what just happened to you and to process what has happened to you. And then the next week, then spend that week just like building your resume. Don't even apply to anything. Just build up your resume. Reflect. Think about what do you want. What do you want for your future? Where are you thinking of going? Because trying to figure this out as you go, like I did, would waste more time and cause more pain and suffering. So that's the first learning that I want to share with you. I guess I ended up sharing the advice as well. And another learning that I learned is, of course, the thing I was sharing about the different roles. When you see roles open, that means that one role is open. So make sure that, I guess my advice for that is make sure that when you see those requisitions, find the key items in that requisition and see where it fits in with your experience, and make sure when you're applying, you're changing your resume to fit in with what's there. And I've shared this in different video. If you want to watch how to get interviews, definitely watch that video. And then I think another key learning was that I didn't give myself enough time to be able to prepare for these interviews. And when I look back, I know I freaked out. I literally screamed. Maybe I'll put a video out of me screaming because I found out while I was on video that I interviewed that many companies in that month just after my layoff. That literally the next week, I think I got laid off on a Wednesday or something. And then the Monday, I was already talking to a recruiter from Google. That same week, I was talking to a recruiter from DoorDash that I already knew, and they were already setting me up for interviews weeks after that, 2-3 weeks after that. I'm like, that's completely wild. With what I know now, I wouldn't spend 2 weeks, just 2 weeks preparing from start. And this is from the very beginning, guys, where I didn't even know what DFS was. I couldn't write you a clean DFS or BFS. I didn't even know what topological sorting. I mean, it's taken me this long to even know how to really do topological sorting. I didn't even know what the hell topological sorting was then, let alone a couple months into my interviewing process. I didn't even know how to handle myself in interviews. I hadn't done mocks, I hadn't done whatever, but I was trying to do DoorDash. So DoorDash, Pinterest, all these companies that I now wish, given what I know now, would interview me today. They interviewed me way early on into my process, and they became like kind of like my mock. So I was mocking with the final. Like, so guys, don't do that. Please don't do that. When you get these opportunities, that's my key thing. That's my key piece of advice I want to share with you. When you get these opportunities, slow down, understand what you need. And I know sometimes it can be hard while you're going through it, because you also have the time that's running for you. I think if you're American, you're watching this, good for you if you have money. But if you don't have money, then you're also probably running through the same thing, where you have a certain amount of time to interview before you run out of money. But even if you're in that scenario where you have to rush, still slow down and like actually practice the algorithms. I would say before you interview with these companies, do at least do 2 pointers, do sliding window questions, do all the sections in educative like I've said, and do those questions under the neat code .io framework or roadmap. Do those sections, do at least the blind 75 questions before you put yourself out there. Before you've put yourself out there, make sure you've done the blind 75. If you're trying to do it without doing that, you're gonna regret it. Because I had a TikTok interview. Literally, this was one of my first interviews. I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? So when I came back from Afrotech, I think a week after, I had my phone screen with TikTok. Literally, this is a role that I had been dreaming to get into. Like, it was a solutions engineer role at TikTok. I'd met someone who was a solutions engineer at TikTok at Afrotech. I'd already been looking at the role before I went to Afrotech, and I had reached out to the hiring manager. He ended up replying back, and I sent him a picture of me with the guy that I met at Afrotech. He was super excited. He had a chat with me. He put me through the interview process. And guys, come on. Of course I didn't do well. And it was questions that in blind 75. This is two of the questions they asked me, they in blind 75. It would take me failing a couple interviews to realize, like, dude, if I just done the blind 75, I would have been ready to actually take these interviews. At least I would have known some of the concept. For example, like, guys, I was obliterated by the Pinterest interview. It completely obliterated me. I was so embarrassed. Like, that's how bad it was. Like, I was completely embarrassed. Like, embarrassment. Like, it was bad. They asked me a try question. I didn't even freaking know what a try was, like how to build a try. I didn't even know how in JavaScript you would print it out to show all the children that are in the try. It was embarrassing. I actually learned about how to print out a try or print out strings that are nested when I actually did my Notion interview 2 months after that. It was fucking hilarious because the interviewer, I done the question, everything correctly, and she asked me to print it out, and I was trying to print it out, and she ended up helping me print it out. And I was like, oh wow, she used stringify, she used it now, she put two, and I went and looked up the stringify method, and I was so embarrassed, and I started thinking about my interview a few weeks prior to that with Pinterest. But anyway, guys, I'm saying this to say, give yourself time. Don't use these companies as mocks. I know that sounds crazy that I'm saying don't use them as mocks, because you probably already know that. But it's a different thing not to do that when you're under pressure, when you really need the job, when you really want the job before a certain time. I'll still really advise doing mocks. So if I was to go back and I had to redo all these things that month, I wouldn't have interviewed technically with any company. So the month of November, how I would restructure this is that I got laid off on October 15. Those 2 weeks of October, I would have spent them, first of all, first week resting. Second week, I would have spent it like preparing my resume, really tailoring, looking at all the roles that I'm seeing in the market that seem interesting, finding out some key items about those roles and what recruiters are looking for, and then changing my resume. And then I'll start reaching out. First of all, with, of course, the low-hanging fruit, the people that are already in my network. But I won't reach out to Google. I won't reach out to TikTok. I won't reach out to DoorDash or Pinterest that first week. I would have reached out to all these startups that had reached out to me prior that were already in my inbox. I would have done those startups, and I would have done and I would have used those startups to help me get up to speed with lead code, right? So I would have spent that whole month lead coding like a crazy person. And I would have done topically, I would have done blind 75 in that month. Maybe that first week, I would have tried to do blind 75, looking at questions, looking at answers, helping build up my ability to do. And then the second week, maybe I would have spent more time looking at text questions for each of those companies I'm talking to or I want to talk to. And then the third week, I would reach out to recruiters to have recruiter calls. And the fourth week, I would probably do maybe chats, like some phone screens. But December is the month that I would have now done phone screens, like technical phone screens, and hopefully on site. So yeah, that was my process. But out of that month, I also interviewed. The good thing that I want to share is I did interview with Benchling. I had a phone screen with Benchling that I passed, and I think at the tail end of that, or the first week of December, I interviewed with Airbnb and I passed that phone screen. So that was positive. So I still had something in me. I was still a fighter. I was quickly learning and quickly changing my method. So that's another thing that I wanted to share with you. Another key learning or key finding that I can advise you: be flexible. Right? As you're seeing your process, let's say you have a phone screen, write down your experience of that. Write down where you went wrong. So for me initially, what I was falling ill to, what I was struggling with was time. So I would get an interview, and it would take me a long time to figure out the algorithm. And sometimes I wouldn't even be able to figure it out. And also I was taking long to type and talk at the same time. So I kept on iterating on this. So my advice on that is that if you're seeing yourself spend a lot of time and sometimes you're not finishing interviews, it means you haven't practiced algorithms enough to be able to support the fundamental, like I was talking about this in my most recent video about how to do lead code, right? Like you haven't done enough lead code problems yet. So stop interviewing, do more in lead codes, right? Make sure that you're in a place where you given a new question, you can spot the things that you need to do. And also, like I advise this to my mentees all the time. When you're interviewing, don't feel the need to speak about every single thing that you're doing. I think this is a mistake that rookies make, where like when you get on the interview, now you want to explain every single thing. If you're already slow at typing, that's going to really slow you down because you're thinking about the things you need to say, but you're also thinking about the code that you want to write, right? So that's incredibly confusing and incredibly painful for you and for the interviewer. What I would suggest is like figure out the algorithm before you start coding at all. You've asked your clarifying questions and now you're coding. Ask the interviewer, you've asked the interviewer clarifying questions. Tell the interviewer like, okay, this is the algorithm, this is how I'm going to solve this problem. Get feedback from the interviewer on what, if they agree and they give you a go ahead to go ahead and implement the solution. When you get that go ahead, just tell them like, I'm going to be typing more. I find it hard to type and speak at the same time. Since you already agreed with the approach that I'm taking, I may speak less than I normally would. Is that fine with you? Normally they're gonna say yep, and then you go ahead, you implement your solution, you ace it, you talk now. If you want to talk now, talk after you've written it down, and you can do a dry run. As an interviewer, if I see that, I'll give you all the 100% marks. And this method has worked for me because normally when I started this process, I was a slower typer. It has taken me more time to ramp up to that. And now I'm at a point where I can even type and think and do all these things in the same time because I've been doing it so long. But if you're early on in your process, that's what I would definitely advise. And you can keep iterating and make it better. So those were the findings that I learned. And quite early on, and I also learned the power, like now looking back, I learned the power of connections. It has taken me a couple months. When I left Afrotech, my feedback to myself was like, okay, this was a failure. I was like, okay, this was a failure. And the reason why it was a failure is because I didn't have an offer after Afrotech, and I was tired. If I tell you, I didn't even go out, I didn't even go to the events that they had, I didn't even have fun. I didn't have fun at all, because all I was thinking is like, my God, I need to have that chat that will lead to that interview, that will lead to that offer.